The landmark case under a media blackout that affects us all. This is from LinkedIn. Many are unaware of a case in the D.C. federal court since April of last year. The case is Laverne versus the U.S. House of Representatives. The case entered court on the standing of net neutrality. Net neutrality is the proposed FCC changes to regulation affecting everyone with a cell phone, computer, and internet access. This also impacts everyone who uploads, shares, creates, or markets on the internet. The proposed changes will give a few major companies the ability to block, throttle, and remove content, right? The case of Laverne versus the U.S. House of Representatives is founded in the U.S. Constitution. Article the first was and still is the protection provided by the Founding Fathers to ensure our voice forever remains a factor in the lawmaking process. It limits representation of each member of the House of Representatives to 50,000 constituents. This is refers to as an apportionment. It guarantees that the voice of the people would not be power held in the hands of the few. This is interesting that they're going to this approach. The question becomes, do you want representation? Do you want a government that is responsive representation? Do you want elections to cost less or next to nothing because they're restricted to your neighborhoods and communities? Do you actually want to have a representative who must face you to get elected? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, you understand that this breaks the status quo. This is why they don't want you to know. When we go to the Constitution, and this brings up like a really important principle that I've talked about before. I used to talk about this at colleges. When it comes to press freedom, if there's one thing the quote-unquote founding fathers of this country got right, and I put founding fathers in quotes because they didn't find anything, but you know, the early thinkers of the contemporary America that we know, if there is one thing they really got right, and they got plenty wrong, and they, you know, did some really immoral stuff, that's a different conversation for a different day. But if there's one thing they nailed, press freedom. They got that right big time. Thomas Jefferson said, if I had to live in a society with newspapers and no government, or government and no newspapers, I'd rather have newspapers and no government. When the whole idea of freedom of the press didn't just reference the idea that, you know, you can publish stuff without fear of force being used against you, like you're going to wind up in jail if you publish something. Freedom of the press also referred to accessibility of the media. It also referred to that if you had a school of thought and a perspective, you could become part of the conversation in this democratic experiment. That's why we used to have 10 different newspapers in any metropolitan area. And newspapers were subsidized by the Postal Service. So let's say that you were, you know, a socialist. This is just a for instance. Of course, socialists did have their own newspapers back in the day. Prior to the 20th century, socialists had their own newspapers, Federalists, Constitutionalists, they all had their own newspapers in any given metropolitan area in the United States. Because what would happen is Postal Service would provide subsidies for any newspaper that needed it, because you were publishing information, you were publishing news, you were publishing stuff that was necessary for civic engagement of the citizens, so you need to have your newspaper be published. Similarly, if you look at it from the idea of press freedom, they cannot overturn net neutrality, because again, we're guaranteed the right that, let's see, I'm trying to go back to the article to see. Lucy really wants in here. It guarantees that the voice of the people would not be power held in the hands of the few. Provided protection from the Founding Fathers to ensure our voice forever remains a factor in the lawmaking process. Well, gee, if you gut the internet, would that ensure that our voice is heard in the lawmaking process? No, it would throttle our ability to have our voice be factored into the lawmaking process. And I would go a step further, and I would say that if you really look at this article in the Constitution, you could go a step further and say the way our media exist should not be legal. And that's something else I believe. I think MSNBC should be illegal. I think Fox News should be illegal. I think CNN should be illegal. Whoa, wait a second, Ron. You're sounding a bit Orwellian here. No, I'm not. Let me explain what I mean. We have a media structure where corporate powers can own it. And that's considered news and information. That's not news and information. That's propaganda for an establishment. That's exactly what that is. That's propaganda for the establishment. And we're not told, by the way. I mean, you can look up who owns MSNBC and you can find out, but they don't give you a disclaimer. Because of the FARA Act, RT America now needs to tell you who they're funded by, but MSNBC doesn't, CNN doesn't, Fox News doesn't. This is not news and information. This is public relations from a corporation. Now, is a corporation free to publish whatever they want? Yeah, sure. But it shouldn't be called news and information because it's conflict of interest 101. Our media should not be owned by a small, elite, powerful group of corporations. Why? Because it violates the Constitution, because there's an article where it says that our voice forever remains a factor in the lawmaking process. If you're not a part of those elite corporations, is your voice a factor in the lawmaking process? No, it is not. Furthermore, if we have a free and open highway called the internet, and they want to throttle that, and they want to let a couple powerful ISPs determine what gets priority treatment, is that ensuring our voice forever remains a factor in the lawmaking process? No, it does not. Which means gutting net neutrality is unconstitutional. And I'll go a step further, and I'll say our media structure as it exists is unfreaking constitutional. It's unconstitutional. So, whether you're on the left or the right, how do you justify that? It's technically unconstitutional. Well, the market will fix itself. Well, this is unconstitutional. The market shouldn't apply to the press. The market shouldn't apply to news and information. Have that debate with a libertarian, see how they respond. I've had that debate with some of my libertarian friends before. So that's a really cool, yeah, I like that. That was a really cool case. And this is my first time hearing about this particular case. And I want to learn more about it.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. That was a clip from Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. What does that mean? That means I log on to a stream and people tweet me articles over on Twitter at Ron Placone, or they use our Reddit subsection, which is just Get Your News On with Ron over on Reddit. And that's how we build the show. I'm seeing all these articles for the first time. We are literally getting our news on together. Follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone so you can participate. And this show streams live every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please do tune in. If you want to support this show, you can do so over on patreon.com/Ron Placone, where for as low as $1 a month, you get access to exclusive podcasts every week, exclusive videos, free tickets to shows when I'm performing in your town, and more for as low as $1 a month. Please do consider it. Thank you so much for your support. This has been Get Your News On with Ron.